is touched by heaven. Everyday encounters with God, those moments when heaven and earth collide, and we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome to episode 77 of Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. A couple nights ago, I was speaking in a church, and I mentioned that the talk had taken a bit of a shift. I'd had a dream, and that dream shifted me to talking more about Mary, mother of Jesus, and some of the things that we discuss and argue over: the Immaculate Conception, the perpetual virginity, Assumption of Mary into heaven, the Queen of Heaven and Earth, the Ark of the New Covenant. What is all this, right? In the dream, and I won't go into all the dream, but bottom line is there's this Little League game going on, and there's a play at the plate, and the catcher gets the guy out, but noticeable is the fact the catcher isn't wearing his normal catcher's gear. You know, the big mask and the big mitts and the shin guards and the chest protector. He's not wearing that. He looked like a guy from the field playing catcher. So what does that mean? Well, all right, trivia question for you. Do you know the slang term for catcher's gear? The mask, the mitt, the shin guard, and the chest protector. Anyone happen to know that? Yes, you in the back? You're absolutely right. They're called the tools of ignorance. What? The tools of ignorance. Major League catcher over 100 years ago coined the phrase because catchers get so beat up. You got foul balls going off the head. You've got pass balls, wild pitches, plays at the plate. They're always in the crouch position. They're killing their legs. And so it's like you're smart enough to be playing baseball, but dumb enough to be the catcher. So you get the tools of ignorance. That's the idea. But in the dream, the catcher had stripped away the ignorance. Oh. And in so doing, he had found truth, if you will, okay? So in the talk, I'm going to play a little bit of it here for you because it got interesting. We start walking through the Bible, but we end up with these 8 priests who survived an atomic blast. True story. So in the talk, let's begin. I'm mentioning Revelation chapter 11. John the Apostle says he was looking up into heaven, and he saw something. He said this. He said, I looked up into heaven, and I saw the Ark of the Covenant. And standing next to it was Harrison Ford. Wait a minute. Is that Spielberg? To be honest with you, I didn't care about the Ark of the Covenant. Other than the movie, I thought the movie was great. But it's just as Ark of the Covenant, Old Testament stuff. I didn't care. I really didn't. I just, who cares? Now I care. The Ark of the Covenant. It's a box. The Ark of the Covenant was a box, a shiny box, a glitzy box. That's what it was. It's where, God resided, basically. And the Israelites would go everywhere they'd go. And don't touch the box, because if you touch the box, people died when they touched the box. So they hooked up a pole so they could carry it around and not touch the box. It's God's presence is there. It's like the tabernacle. Okay, what's in the box? Well, there were the tablets, the commandments, right? 2 tablets. Of course, if anybody saw the movie History of the World Part 1, you saw Mel Brooks coming down Mount Sinai holding 3 tablets. Behold, 15 commandments. And then he drops one. We're down 5. Well, behold. So inside there is the Word of God, the commandments, tablets. What else is in the box? Manna from heaven. The bread from heaven, right? The bread from heaven. Kept them alive. Every day for 40 years, God threw food on them, so they put manna from heaven in there. And they also had the rod of Aaron. Aaron was the brother of Moses, and Aaron was the high priest. So you have that in there, these 3 things, right? Well, when we look at Mary, what do we see? What does she, in the womb, what does she have? She also had, of course, the Word of God in the flesh. And she had the living bread, the living manna, if you will, from heaven, in the flesh, inside. And of course, she had the high priest in Jesus Christ. So that's the beginning part. That's the beginning point for the Ark of the Covenant, Ark of the New Covenant for Mary. But now let's compare the two, because this, as I started this process after this dream, this is where things got a little crazy for me. Because once again, Ark of the Covenant, I don't really care. I don't care that Mary is the Ark of the New Covenant until I found this. Moses dies. Joshua takes over. He's got the Ark of the Covenant, and they're getting real close to the Promised Land now. The sign's right there, promised land, 5 miles. Okay, we're close. And he's got the ark, and they walk up to the river Jordan, and the waters part. Doesn't get near the crest of the Red Sea, but it parts. And they walk across, and they go into the promised land, right? And God says, it's yours. And they go, there are people here. So here they are in the promised land, and there's people all over the place. And they got weird names. There are the Hittites over there, and the Canaanites over there, and the stalactites are over there, and the stalagmites are over here. So there's people. And God says, don't worry about it. He says, they've got pagan gods. You've got me, and I've got you. You're a part of me, I'm part of you. And I'm going to give them such a sign. I'm going to give them such a sign that you have the God with you. Such a sign that either they're going to steer clear or they're going to want to join us. But I'm going to give them such a sign. And they head off to Jericho, the place with the walls, right? You know how thick these walls were? They said you could put 2 chariots side by side. That's how thick the walls were. Impenetrable, right? But God told him what to do. He says, now, here's what you do. You take the ark, power of God with you. You got the power of God with the ark. Every day for 6 days, I want you to walk around. I want you to walk around Jericho. Every day, just don't talk. Just walk around Jericho with the ark once a day. But on the 7th day, I want you to walk around 7 times. And when you walk around 7 times with the ark, then I want you to blow the ram's horns and shout. And they were going to shout praises to God. And he said, God told him, when you do that, the walls are going to come down. Well, okay, so they go around 7 times on the 7th day, and they blow the ram's horns, and they all shout praise to God, and son of a gun, all the walls come crumbling down. Now it gets weirder, because God says to them, now then, kill every man, woman, child, animal. What? A little over the top, isn't it? Kill every man, woman, child, animal. Oh, except one. There's one household. There's a prostitute who helped us, who has the messengers. Our messengers are inside. So you take those 3 people out. Take the prostitute and the 2 messengers out of the equation. Other than that, kill every man, woman, child, animal. And then, don't take any of their stuff. Leave it. Don't pick up. Don't scavenge. Don't go to a garage sale. Don't go into the gift shop. Nothing. Burn it all. Every bit of it. Touch nothing. Burn it. I want everybody dead, and I want everything burned, and these crumbled walls. Don't you ever rebuild Jericho. Leave it as a sign. Wow! Hello, Old Testament. What a sign. He says they're going to know you have God with you. Wow. Sure about that, huh? Okay. Let's just put that aside for 1 second here and get back to Mary, because she's the Ark of the New Covenant. Does that sound like her personality? So let's go to the Ark of the New Covenant. Okay. Anybody have one of these with them? Rosary?
I got 2.
You got 2? Yep. Both hands? What do you got?
I got 2 of them.
2 Hail Marys at a time. You get through a lot faster that way. Okay. Well, Mary is the Ark of the New Covenant. Okay. Let's tell you what, let's take a look at this rosary historically. She appeared in the 1200s to St. Dominic with one of these, and she said to St. Dominic, preach this and pray this every day. I like to think she says that to all priests. Preach this and pray this every day, because this is your greatest spiritual weapon. Remember back in Genesis where I'm going to put enmity between the woman and the serpent, war's going on? Here's your weapon. She's saying it. This is your greatest spiritual weapon. In fact, wear it on your belt line. You'll see priests, right? Clergy and whatnot. They put it on the belt line because it's a sword. She means business with this thing. Preach this. Pray this. Not every now and then, every day. Wow. We move into the 1500s, we get the Reformation going on, and Martin Luther comes along, and you know what he says this is? Nonsense. Now, Martin Luther, to his credit, said Mary is the mother of God, and he said there was an Immaculate Conception and that she never did sin, and he agrees that she was a perpetual virgin. He even said that he called her the Queen of Heaven for a while. But this? No. You know what God said in response? Because everything I've told you to now, God is speaking, isn't he? Everything he does, he's making a statement to us, isn't he? He's telling us something. So what did God say to Martin Luther saying this is nonsense? In 1754, down in Colombia, South America, there's a place that is now called Our Lady of the Rock. What it was, this giant rock formation. Anyway, there was a huge miracle that happened there in 1754. A young girl had a lot of health issues. She couldn't speak, she couldn't hear, and she died. And her mother didn't give up and prayed to Jesus at this rock location to bring her back to life, and Jesus did. And not only did he bring her back, when she came back, she could speak and she could hear. Well, all the townspeople freaked out, and they all go out because they knew this girl was sick. They knew she was dead, and suddenly she's perfect. She can speak, she can hear, she's alive. And they go out to this rock formation, and they see something they've never seen before out there. They see this image on the rock, and they're looking at this thing, and they're going, is that painted? What is that? On the rock, life-size, an image of Mary holding the Christ child, and she's holding a rosary out to an image of St. Dominic. And the Christ child is holding out what's called a friar's cord to St. Francis of Assisi. And they're looking at this going, is this paint? Where did this come from? Geologists later came in there, and they bored holes into this image 3 feet. It's still in there. It's into the rock that much. And that's why it's called Our Lady of the Rock. You can go down there and see it now. It's there. That's how God responded to, this is nonsense. This is your greatest spiritual weapon. This is to be prayed every day. Preach this. Pray this. We move ahead to 1858 in Lourdes. Bernadette, right? Mary appears to St. Bernadette, and what's the first thing Bernadette does? She goes down on her knees, she reaches into her pocket, and she pulls out the rosary. And Mary's got her rosary right there. You go ahead to 1917 at Fatima. Every month, Mary said to those 3 children, a first grader, a third grader, and a fourth grader equivalent, and says to these children, pray this every day. You want world peace? Because the war was on, World War I. She says, pray this every day, right? Okay, let's jump ahead to World War II. Gets more interesting. We're waiting. Are we going to go into the war or not? Started in 39. We get to 1941, the end of 41, and we know the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th. We declare war on December 8th, Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Coincidence? Is Mary with us? Is the Ark of the New Covenant with us? I don't know. Until you look at when the war ended. Emperor Hirohito of Japan announcing on the radio to the people of Japan, we have just surrendered. That was August 15th of 1945. Interesting.
August 15th is the feast day of the Assumption of Mary into heaven, body and soul.
Coincidence? That's a really big coincidence. Ark of the Covenant? Is Mary with us? When the war began, Americans flew into churches. That always happens during a war. That always happens. You know, you get more people in there. And they're in there and they're praying the rosaries and they're going to Mass. They're praying for fathers, sons, brothers, mothers, daughters, sisters. There's just a ton of prayer going on to protect, for peace, right? Well, the war ended. Why? Because we dropped the atomic bomb. August 6th, Hiroshima, right? Devastating. Horrible, right? Horrible. August 6th, we dropped the bomb. An atomic bomb, when it explodes, creates such heat, millions of degrees of heat, and it just blasts out in all directions, right? So at Hiroshima, for miles, everything was just pulverized and vaporized and dead and radiation and contamination. It was horrible, horrible. But if you look at just the first mile, if you look at just that first huge mile in all directions, what do you find? Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. And every man, woman, child, animal is dead. What? Everything's on fire, and every man, woman, child, animal is dead, except for one household. And in the household are messengers, God's messengers. 8 blocks away from where the bomb hit. 8 blocks. That's just from here to over there. 8 blocks away at a church, Our Lady of the Assumption Catholic Church. The church is gone. But in the parish house, 8 Jesuit priests are alive. No ill effects at all. They all lived out full lives with absolutely no effects at all. Wow. One of the priests said what happened to him was they had just finished Mass, and it was about 8:15 in the morning. He says a lot of them sitting down to breakfast, putting a spoon into grapefruit, and they saw the blast. And this one priest said, I just went flying into the air. He said, I felt like a leaf in an autumn breeze, just tumbling and tossing and turning, and I landed on the ground, and I looked outside, and I could see the train station gone. It's just been flattened. It's on fire, but I'm okay. And the other 7 priests were okay too. They're looking around. It's pure devastation, and they're alive. Doctors came in, and they examined these guys, and they told them, you'll be dead tomorrow or the next day, because the contamination, this poison, is going to take over your body, and you're going to be dead. No contamination, no radiation, long lives. 200 examinations of their body over the next rest of their lives. These guys were constantly being examined. Anything going on yet? Nothing. Perfect. I mean, one anomaly, but this was 8, where everything else, every man, woman, child, animal was dead, where everything is on fire, and these guys are fine. Nuclear physicists came in. They looked at the building. No way. They said the only way this building is still standing here is if there was an external force pushing against that atomic blast, equal or greater to. That's the only way this building is still here. And then they said to the priests, there's no way. There's no way. He said, here's what should have just happened to you guys. Your heads should have been crushed. Your limbs should have been blown off. Your eardrums should have exploded. Your clothes should be on fire. And when you took a breath, just one breath, you'd be breathing in air that is thousands of degrees hot. You should be dead. And here you are. Wow. Tell me the difference between Jericho and Hiroshima. I'm looking at this and I'm going, it's the same story. It's the same story. If you go back to the Old Testament, what did God say? I want to create a sign. I'm going to give everyone a sign that of my presence, that I am here, that I am with you and you are with me. A sign. And then you have Hiroshima. 80,000 people were instantly dead. 140,000 total died. Well, that's not our God. Come on, our God is merciful. That's the Old Testament mean, wrathy God. You know that. We have the New Testament God. We have the nice God now. Remember, he changed, remember? No, that can't be our God. Our God is merciful. He wouldn't do that. Merciful. It's estimated, I heard a story, it's estimated that had we gone into Japan to fight conventionally, we'd have lost 1 million men. 1 million. Who knows how many million Japanese would have died? Mercy? Where's the mercy? Which is the mercy? I have a pretty good bet here that a lot of us, or at least some of us in this room, wouldn't be in here today because our fathers or grandfathers would have died. And I'm one of them. I had a father of the age where he could have been one of the guys going over. Maybe I'm not standing here. You'd have another speaker, or just an empty podium. What the heck? Is it the same story? I'm just asking the question here. Is that the same story? Does Hiroshima not seem to be a greater, louder message of God that I'm here? That I'm saving these messengers? Just asking. Does that not seem to be a greater sign? I thought it interesting too. 8 Jesuit priests. So today I thought, what does that mean, 8? Biblically, spiritually, what does the number 8 mean? And I looked it up. You know what it means? Resurrection, renewal, regeneration, rebirth, to begin again. How many people were on Noah's Ark? 8. Here's 8 Jesuit priests. Everything else is gone. God always said he would never destroy the entire world again through flood and all that, right? But look at it, he seems to be doing a mini version, doesn't he? Everything is gone. Everything is dead, but 8 Jesuit priests. Interesting, those priests. They went out, and what did they do? They preached, didn't they? They preached the story. Because when they were asked, why do you think you're alive? They all said the same thing. We're alive because we lived the message of Fatima. We prayed the rosary every day. And she said she would protect us, and she did. What's that prayer that they added to the rosary at Fatima? Oh my Jesus, forgive us our sins. Save us from the fires of hell. On earth this time. Fascinating. Interesting. So they're out there preaching the power of the rosary, the Ark of the New Covenant, right? I find this interesting too. During a war, attendance at Mass always spikes, right? Always spikes. But in this particular war, with the Ark of the Covenant, with God seemingly saying, I'm with you, you're with me, that is evil, you're a Christian nation, I'm going to save my people, and I'm going to give the world a sign. And by the way, and if I'm going to ask, I'm not going to be able to see it, but I want you to wave your hand if you've ever heard the 8 Jesuits surviving story of Hiroshima. Just raise your hands. Just wave your hands. May I assume it's a minority? Very few people? Why is that? Is this not one of the greatest signs of God? Is this not one of the greatest signs of our Catholic faith? This is an amazing story that everybody should know about the power of the rosary, the Ark of the Covenant, that when we are with God, God is with us. Because that had to come first. We had to be with God. It doesn't work the other way around. It's not, hey, you're with me or not, God? It's no, are we with Him? And we were praying our rosaries and we were going to Mass. Interesting, after the war, Mass attendance still stayed high. Going into the 50s, Mass attendance was growing at a faster rate than the population. To the point where the number one show on television is a bishop standing in front of a chalkboard? What the heck? Hello, Bishop Sheen. He's standing in front of a chalkboard. And it's the number one show on television. Tens of millions of people are watching. A lot of non-Catholics just wanting to learn from the Master. That's what happened. Fascinating. Living the message of Fatima.
So there you go. What does a non-believer who wants to stay a non-believer do with that story? Well, they can't go there. It's like, I don't know, that's some weird anomaly. I don't know. Let's move on. They can't go there. Last week I was talking to Father John Nargang, and there was a part of the conversation I didn't use, but I'm going to use it here because now it fits. It has to do with science. Certainly that's a heck of a science project we just heard there. It has to do with science and the unwillingness sometimes for people to go to where science takes them if it begins to touch God, if you will. So here's Father John Nargang, who last week, if you missed it, he had wonderful experiences, near-death experiences in Padre Pio, and very cool. So make sure you listen to those. But here, I just asked him at the end of the conversation, was there anything else he wanted to talk about?
Oh man, I mean, living the Christian life, I would just encourage, like, for your listeners who are searching and are open to the Christian faith and Catholic faith and looking to learn more, I just want to encourage them in continuing to remain open to the idea that God's grace from above can transform the way we think, the way we act, can make us better people. There's a whole dynamic of operation there that is on a whole nother level, that all it takes on our part is a little bit of humility and openness. And I think in a world today dominated by so much scientism, and of course again by scientism, I mean the basic ideology that says there is no truth beyond that which could be proved and replicated scientifically. I mean, that's actually a very closed-minded way of looking at the world when you take into the totality of the human experience and things along the lines of what we're talking about. Why could you not just as much say we are still developing so much as human beings? You look at the way our bodies of knowledge have developed over the last millennia. Why would you not, looking at that, instead be open to saying, let's acknowledge all the realities out there that we don't yet know, and let's have a little bit of humility in trying to impose on this great, wondrous world this limited mindset saying, well, it's not objective truth unless it's demonstrated by science. Science itself is a great tool, but my goodness, how much science can uncover, and how much the expert scientists will say, astronomers will say, there is so much yet to be discovered, and we need to have humility, you know?
Yeah, science, how many times does science keep correcting itself? Remember when we started out with galaxies that were fixed in space, and then no, they're going to be it's all going to come back together again and make another big bang. Then they find out no, the galaxies are flying apart from each other and they're speeding up, and it's like, this makes no sense whatsoever. Zippo.
Yes, and I might remind my brother and sister skeptics, and me being a former skeptic, that I was shocked to learn that it was a Catholic priest who formulated the Big Bang Theory itself.
Yes.
Father George Lemaitre from Belgium, who I remember, there's a great book on this. It was written by guys at the Discovery Channel. They were talking about the whole history of the development of theories around this, the Big Bang and everything. And it was amazing because when Father Lemaitre went to this like astrophysicist conference to present this, Albert Einstein was in attendance, and he was like, no way, that's not possible. But eventually Albert Einstein came around. And I thought, isn't that a great kind of like representative story of a possible harmony between faith and reason, like embodying those two guys, like in a way, like if only we could get our scientist friends to pay more attention, for example, when we subject Eucharistic miracles to scrutiny. Like, you know, we live in an age now when there's a Eucharistic miracle, we can subject it to scientific study. And, you know, we had a speaker at a Catholic shrine in Massachusetts, the Divine Mercy Shrine, where I used to work when I was at the Marian Fathers. And his name is Dr. Ricardo Castañón. I encourage anyone listening to look up him in YouTube or on Google. Most of the stuff's in Spanish because that's his first language, but he has given a couple talks in English. And here's a guy who was an atheist scientist, and he got involved investigating the Eucharistic miracle where a consecrated host that had become dirty, fallen on the ground, changed into a reddish substance, that they took it to a forensic laboratory. They had a histopathologist who's an expert on human tissue look at it, and they determined that it was heart tissue with intact white blood cells, which is an impossibility because white blood cells can't remain intact for longer than like 20 minutes outside the human body, and the sample by that point was 3 years old or something. So there are areas here where science, if they're willing to take a look at it, can find out some pretty amazing things that they're not going to be able to explain. But Castañón himself said there was a great reluctance. Like, he said that he would have a newspaper writer interested in writing the story, but then he'd throw it up to the editor, and the editor, who didn't see any of that, he'd kill it. Or he'd bring it to the scientific journals. They'd be like, no, we're not going to publish this. So there was a great reluctance. And then you wring your hands and you're like, oh man, why? If only we could improve this dialogue between faith and science, you know, there could be some real breakthroughs here. People could learn some amazing things.
Yeah. Well, and it always turns into heart muscle. Every time one of those Eucharistic miracles happen, it never turns into anything else. It's always human heart muscle. Always.
Yeah.
Hello, Jesus.
Yeah.
It's dazzling. I've always thought, you know, sometimes I'll see on YouTube debates between atheists and believers and all that. I always thought, what would I do? Because, you know, I can't get into the philosophy like some of these brainiacs do. I think I would just go, okay, you have 5 minutes to respond. I would talk about the miracle of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And next time I would talk about a Eucharistic miracle. You know, I think I would just almost ignore everything because it's just arguing back and forth that says nothing. I think I would just give them things, help me understand this one, explain this one, and just have the documentation there and say, that's my defense that there is a God.
Right.
That's what I would do. I don't know if it'd get anywhere, but that's what I'd do.
Yeah, I could go with that.
Thanks again, Father. What's our takeaway today? What did God just say in this episode? That we're all little leaguers. We're all children of God. We're all learning the game, and we all need to do the best we can to strip away the ignorance of our faith, to find our way to the truth. God will meet us wherever we are, and then just let God take you to the next step and the next step. Thanks for listening. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for supporting us through Patreon. Big shout out to Matt Manerick, who is supporting us on Patreon. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your support. You can do the same if you want to help us out on a monthly basis. You can go to this episode, 77, here at touchedbyheaven.net, or go straight to Patreon, patreon.com, and just search for Trapper Jack. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.